Itinerary-wise, we want to focus on what are the key metrics you need to capture. So that'll be our first focus. And then we also want to be thinking about what I call sort of data gaps. Where is the pieces of information that you're not capturing, and how do we sort of work that through to sort of fill those data gaps and prioritize those? And then I'll give you a little idea about scorecards. I'm a big fan of scorecards. We use them here throughout the business in hireful. And then I want to talk about the future of recruitment analytics and AI, and maybe sort of showcase some of the benchmarking for next week as well. But yeah, this is what we're talking about: working smarter, not harder. I don't think it is possible to work much harder these days. I'm sure most of you would agree. If your approach to work is just to get, people give you more requirements, ask more of you. That's both candidates and, I guess, managers. If your approach to it in this day and age is, I'll just do more, I'll just work longer, that typically doesn't work. So with the advent of AI and everything else that's rolling through, it's about really leveraging data, automation, everything else, so we can really make a real difference. Maybe even work less. Now, I need to put this disclaimer in because I will be showing you some of our live hireful data. I won't be showing you any individual customers' data. That's important for me to say. I'm sure you understand why I'm saying that, because I don't have their permission to do it, and I wouldn't want to be showing their data. But I'll be showing you like the herd, the entire community. I'll say, here's how it works for application form completion rates, and there'll be about 500,000 applicants that will be showing you the data for there, just to give you real tangible data of how UK customers are actually recruiting. Okay, but before we do any of that, I've got a quick survey that I'm going to throw out. I just want to get a bit of a sense check, and it's 4 quick questions, I think. So what do you do with your recruitment data? And try and be honest with me here, because I'm not going to call you out, don't worry. But I'm interested in seeing, how well you review it, whether you just collect it, whether you even struggle to collect it, how you rate that data collection out of 10, how you'd rate the data analysis, the sort of process you go through about looking at the data, reflecting on it, and taking action. And then I want to know, finally, whether any of you have taken any real action based on that data, because that's what we want. We want, not just collecting data, not just taking that, we'll just tweak that. We want to be able to see real things and make real changes based on that data. So 4 questions there. Normally don't throw out 4 questions, but I'm feeling very questioned. I'm loving my data, so I want more data from you today. So you're going to give me some data. I'm going to share that, and we'll all get to sort of know a little bit more about ourselves. So I'm just going to give that about 15 more seconds, just so you guys can plot your answers. Okay, so 5 seconds. Yeah, looks like everyone who's answered is going to answer. Brilliant. So let me just show you the results. We'll talk through them. So this is perhaps what I might have expected. About 1 in 5 are struggling to collect data. That might be because you don't have an ATS. It might be because your ATS is not particularly great at collecting data, or something else. And obviously the group here, the 27%, we collect it and regularly review it, along with the annually review it. Those are the sort of 1 in 3 groups. So the occasionally review it people, the 1 in 3 as well, occasionally review it. That's an easy thing to fix, isn't it? It's just to say, look, we collect this data, we have this data, let's put a date in the diary, let's look at things. If we have a monthly meeting, let's pull out 3 metrics or 4 metrics and make sure that they're discussed in the monthly meeting, maybe in a scorecard. I can talk about that later on. Okay. And then rating the data collection. So, oh, wow. Right. Okay. So not high scores on that. No, most people falling in at around 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. And then data analysis process. Yeah, probably not looking quite so healthy there either. Okay. But hey, that's why we're on the session. But on a more positive basis, people are taking real action. So 40% of people are taking real action from the data that they're seeing. So that's good news. Okay, thank you for that, guys. Let me talk to you about some data. Let me share some data with you. I'm going to try and go through this a little bit chronologically. So abandonment rates, or you can reverse it and you can talk about application form completion rates. They're essentially the same thing. People come along and well, actually, I'm talking about, that should be titled application form completion rate. No, actually, sorry, this is abandonment rate. There's an AppCast survey which looks at lots of different ATSs. It is several years old now. It's quite hard to get this data from other ATSs, and they showed at the time that about 92% of applications weren't completed. I'm not sure, it really depends on the process, because I think a lot of job boards see this now where, you send people across to complete an application on an ATS, and people, as soon as they start sent across to another thing, they go, well, I don't like this experience, we'll showcase this in just a few minutes, where a lot of the job boards are encouraging now you to complete the application on the job board, which obviously completes the application rate. So yeah, if you're sent across to something, I always use EasyJet, Taleo. Taleo bought by Oracle several years ago, so I really should call it Oracle, but it's Taleo's software. It's really old. It's now what's called Oracle Recruitment. You can see it's really old because when you get the sign-in process, you want to sign in because you've got to create a username, password. That's quite an outdated process. Most of us as applicants would be like groaning at that. But good news, if you've got a Yahoo account, you remember Yahoo used to be like the most important internet company out there in, let's say, 1996. Then yeah, you can sign in with your Yahoo account. And it's just a very long, laborious process. Password's got to be, got to have certain criteria to it, but they won't tell you that password when you put it in here. They'll tell you only after you've failed or something. So it's a bit painful. So that's what we want to avoid. And we want to really think about reducing abandonment rate, because as we all become more digitally literate, we have less time, we've got less patience to fill out this stuff. Our expectation is we should be able to do things even quicker. The world we live in now, you can, book a cab, buy a pizza, order a McDonald's, have a coffee delivered to your house. You can do all that in 60 seconds for the most part with an app on your phone. Do any of us feel like we've got more time? Most of us feel like it's so busy and everything's so fast, even though things are happening so fast. So our expectations are we want things super quick. And obviously that is candidates and younger candidates definitely as well. So just to give you an idea, this is our application with hireful, and this is what a lot of ATS has gone to now, a much more standardized, easy to use form. We have a simple form at the start, the pre-form we call it, and then we've got the main form. The pre-form ensures we gather the candidates' basic details in case they abandon. We can go back to them and start emailing them and say, hey, look, I'll be like when you put something in your basket, you don't complete the purchase, that e-commerce company will say, hey, did you want to buy those shoes or whatever? So yeah, that's the way we work, 2 steps. It's pretty straightforward. I can't make the screen images bigger on that, Simon, unfortunately. So yeah, I do appreciate they are a little bit, I can actually zoom in, right? I can zoom in. I don't normally do that on a PowerPoint, but you can sort of see the general idea, but you can go to hireful's website, you better see our vacancies and see what's going on there. But it's just a simple principle that, it's a standard shorter form. Now, what we're doing here is I'm not here to sell hireful necessarily. I'm sure you've worked out I'm happy to promote hireful, but most ATSs now, the newer versions, the old stuff can be a bit cumbersome, but the new ATSs, they all tend to work to a much simpler form. Just a sort of a one page. Now, we've got customers that work in the not-for-profit sector. They don't take CVs. They want work experience. They want to know all your data gaps in employment, and they need all that in order to have the data they need for perhaps a DBS check and all those types of things. Perfectly understandable. That's how they work. So that would be a multi-page form. There's still no registration, but it would be a much longer process, and their application form completion rate or abandonment rate is going to be different to a simple form like this. So the principle I'm making is monitor this number. I'm going to show you a real live number from our data here now. Let me just drag it into screen. This one, is it here? No, it is this one. I've got too many slides up. Okay, so this is real data. It's sort of a preview mode at the moment. But what have we got here? We have got, I think it's, over 500,000, well, over 600,000, you add them together. applications in the last 90 days coming into hireful ATS, and you'll see a 92% completion rate. Now, nothing we're doing is clever there. What I'm saying is you'll get a 92% completion rate if your form is straightforward. Yeah, nice and simple. People click on it, they'll complete it. So you'll always have some people who won't, and that's it. I don't know what the EasyJet Taleo form style will be, but in my mind, it would be a lot less. They've got a fantastic brand, EasyJet. So I'm sure lots of people are motivated to apply for them. So I'm sure you can have that. But if it was Milton Keynes Council, let's say, not such a great brand, maybe, if they've got a similar process, they're going to struggle. Yeah. Interesting, you can also see desktop and mobile, and there's some people unassigned. So you can sort of see here, so desktop and mobile, bit of a split there. So you can see people applying via both methods. Okay, but that was just to give you a bit of an overview. Simple form, monitor that abandonment rate. So it's definitely a number that people are not monitoring or not familiar with. And if you should be benchmarking, we'll talk about that in the next webinar, and you should be thinking about, what changes can we make? And then if you make changes to the form, maybe you're adding questions in. I'd only be doing that if they're really important. But if you're taking questions out or changing the process to make it a bit easier, then you should be watching how much data changes the abandonment rate. Okay. Oh, and there are also some other metrics around abandonment rate that can improve it. Like I say, if there's features on the ATS that if a candidate half completes it, they go back and encourage the candidate to apply. It sends a further email as the closing date comes up. Those types of features that we have and others do as well, then that should reduce your abandonment rate as well. Yeah. Okay, time to apply. So there was a study done across 10 different ATSs. It didn't include hireful. It was bigger and bigger brands, perhaps global ones as well. They did 100 applications, just one application into different companies, but 10 different ATSs. And they worked out the average time to apply was about 4 minutes, 42 seconds, which is quite an interesting benchmark number. This is from the State of Candidate Experience 2023. And then what's interesting from that, though, what we also showed, so about 3/4 of the companies required you still, a bit like the Taleo example, to create a user account. Okay. And the average number of fields to be completed was 24. So these are good numbers to benchmark your application form against, perhaps. Now, look at these, though. The fastest companies, look at the number of clicks and the number of mandatory fields. And they're all essentially financial companies or you could call them fintech companies or starting bankers. Some of these are sort of challenger brands in that financial space, but they're all in that financial services, financial technology space. Okay. Massively huge drive, war for talent in their area. And what they're doing is they're saying, we're going to collect the basic details, nothing else. We're not going to put any frills on it. Our recruiters will then we have a big enough team that can jump on it and review their own applications to get back to people. Yeah. So it is horses for courses. I mean, they're in a different setting. They've got probably huge pressure to grow fast and hire people and hire very hard to find talent, perhaps. Whereas let's pick on Milton Keynes Council. They need more data because, well, historically they've asked for more data, but they expect more and they grow at a slower rate and plod along a little bit. Not being rude to my local council, but they weren't included in the study here. But that was just a bit of an idea. You can see how these are really fast. So it does, changing the form and the number of fields will massively change the time to apply. I don't know the completion rates because these individual companies should know that, but I would imagine the completion rates would be very high if it's that quick. Okay. But then what happened after that was quite interesting as well. 85% of companies in this process sent a post-application email. Yeah, so they were all using ATSs. So 15% of the ATSs didn't have a simple email that come out that said, "Thank you, we've got your application," which was bizarre. Assuming that wasn't caught in spam or something. And then over half of the companies confirmed the outcome within 4 weeks. So I presume they put in a dummy rubbish CV in most cases because they weren't a real candidate. But they only got a rejection email from about half. So about half didn't even reject candidates, which is not great from a candidate experience perspective. And 6 companies requested feedback. So that would be, this is a bit bizarre, I think, as well. That would be asking for us doing a survey to say, how was the application process for you? I'm not a big fan of getting feedback. I'm a big fan of getting feedback, and I'll cover that off later on about surveying and where to survey. I don't think it's a good idea necessarily to survey your application form process. It's a bit like I did order a couple of bolts. I can't remember what they were for now. And I got the delivery of the bolts, and obviously from Amazon. And Amazon, the people who sent the bolts said, "How were the bolts?" And I'm like, "Well, they worked." I didn't feel like delivering a review. And then the people who delivered the bolts, well, they asked for a review of how was the delivery of the bolts. And this is the world we live in a little bit, where you can be over surveyed. So I think you've got to be very careful on that. What I would suggest at the most you would want to do is immediately after the application process, yeah, to have like maybe a thumbs up or a thumbs down. How was this for you? Yeah. And that will just give you a quick indication. And maybe you get a thumbs down, maybe people can give a bit of feedback as to why their experience wasn't great. That's possible, but I wouldn't go much further than that. Oh, so in answer to your question, Josh, there was 100 companies. They weren't asked to join the survey, by the way. They were, the people producing this report, which will be a link in the appendix for you. You can check it out. And they do this similar report maybe in different years as well. So they might not do it quite the same way, but I thought this year was very interesting. They literally just went to 100 companies' websites. They didn't ask those companies to engage, and they made a dummy application into their ATS. I'm sure they appreciated another irrelevant application in their ATS, but that was how they did it. Okay, so there was 100 companies involved in this. So it's interesting. So Harriet's asked, what do you think about feedback forms after the full recruitment process? Yeah, big fan of that, Harriet. I'm going to show you some ideas on surveying and what I'd recommend on surveying. We're going to get to that in just a second, but good question. So ratios are really important as well. Ratios will tell you a lot about what's going on in your recruitment. Applications per job, application to shortlist. So we've had 100 applicants and we've shortlisted 20 for the manager to review perhaps. Interview to acceptance ratio. So, we've asked this many people to interview. How many people have accepted that? Interview to offer ratios, offer to acceptance ratio, and offer acceptance to confirm starts. How many people dropped out after saying they wanted to start? Okay. And obviously I've said here on the offer to acceptance ratio, if they decline, you should be recording, not in a free text way. You should have like a drop down where you categorize people and say, they declined the offer for this reason. Now, there's always a story about why they declined the offer, but there's always a reason. Yeah. So I would sort of group them into reasons. So like it was salary, it was benefits, it was if they're choosing another company over you, the reason they're declining you is your company, is the company. So you just chose it was us, it was the company. They thought the other company was a better employer, simple as that. Or they chose their role over your role because they felt the role was a better fit for them. Why did they decline the role, the offer? Because of the role. They weren't as interested in doing this role compared to the other option they had. Okay, but that's a good example of a data gap. If you just collect it all free text, yeah, you can reflect on it and you know the story, but when it comes around to making decisions, you can't. And then what happens is someone walks into, sends you an email, probably more likely than walks into the room and says, oh, we've just offered this candidate £45,000, but they've been offered 60 by one of our competitors. All of our salaries are wrong. We need to change everything. And it's like, well, are they all wrong? Have we got any data to support this? And if you can go, look, we have an offer acceptance ratio of 94%. We can benchmark that against these other, against this report that talked about it. I'll show you some benchmarks data for that next week. And you can also say, look, we've been recording why people are declining our offers and only 10% are saying it's due to salary. So, the data helps you in these scenarios to have proper conversations about your recruitment. Yeah. Also bear in mind, the changes you make in your recruitment process should be reflected in the data, yeah? And the changes you might want to make might be driven by the data. So in simple scenarios, if your applicant to shortlist ratios are really low, maybe your advert copy is not great. Maybe lots of people feel like they can apply for the role because you're not being very explicit about what you want. And maybe you're not building like vacancy specific or auto reject questions onto the application form. Forklift truck driver. Do you have a forklift truck driving license? So if you change your recruitment process by writing better adverts, by asking more specific questions on those application forms for that specific job, then maybe there's less irrelevant applicants that are getting through. There'll always be a decent number of irrelevant applicants. I'm sure you guys have worked that out. I don't know how long you've worked in recruitment, but you've probably worked that out already. But these ratios are really important. They'll tell you what's going on. Are hiring managers making the right decisions? Are we sending them the right people? All of these types of things. Are we interviewing the right people? Yeah, it's all driven by ratios in my mind. So you should know your ratios and be abreast of them. Okay, so I don't know why it says number one there because number two, but the key metrics you should be measuring. So I'm going to zip past hireful agency ratios. I'm not going to be showing you that today, but what I'll do, I do want to talk about, do you recruit fast enough? This is definitely a really key area. I'm going to promote the fact that we've actually launched AI shortlisting now. So our customers that use that, when they log in, after they've set questions for the AI to review the candidate's application form against, they can then see who's the best performing candidates against those specific questions that they set, and then they can jump to that talent faster. Yeah, they still need to review all the applicants, but it means when they log in the morning, they've got 100 applicants, they'll see like there's 6 candidates that are really good, and they can go straight to those and engage with them first. So as more ATSs use AI to help them, to support them with shortlisting, speed is going to be getting even faster. So the challenges of you not recruiting fast enough today are going to be exacerbated if you're still recruiting at the same speed next year. Does that make sense? So we're going to be thinking that, yeah, are we going fast enough now? But what's our plan to go faster? Because if you have like your interview to offer acceptance, so your interview acceptance ratio, let's look at that as a scenario. If a candidate's had 4 interviews scheduled already, and you're the 5th organisation to phone that candidate up to say, hey, you look a really good fit for our role, can I schedule you in? That's a much harder bar to get them to agree to engaging with a 5th company than it would have been for the 1st or the 2nd company. So the quicker you can get to candidates, the greater likelihood that you'll be involved in the process of the people they're looking at, the organizations they're looking at, and the greater likelihood you'll actually make them an offer perhaps before someone else does, because quite often the first person that makes a good, decent offer, not always, wins the candidate. Because no one says, oh, I just want to interview every single company. I want to make sure I've seen everything. People normally get quite tired and stressed out by interviewing. They're looking for a solution, a better job, a better work-life balance, whatever that is. As soon as they find it, then they're normally happy and they'll accept your offer. So speed is key. Okay, so let's have a look at some time ratios then. So some of the things you might want to be thinking about: average time to approve a new vacancy. So if you've got a vacancy approval process, someone submits the request, how long does it take to get through that process? Something you should be measuring, definitely. Average time to process new applicants. You should want to do that from a candidate experience perspective as well. That's important. Average time to interview, average time at interview stage. So average time to interview, if you're using AI shortlisting, that number should definitely drop, because you should be able to find the people you want to interview faster. Yeah. So that should definitely drop. And what we're really interested in is average time to engage, that first conversation, we're interested in measuring that for our customers using AI shortlisting, because that's the number we think is going to have the biggest effect. And then this is an important one as well. The time from the first interview happening to the candidate either being rejected or offered. How long were they rolling around that interview process? So, do you have a very set process, or is it a case of, oh, let's add it, so-and-so also wants to meet them, and all that sort of thing? They just drag and drag and drag. Average time to offer, average time to start, average time to fill vacancy. So that last one is from the vacancy becoming available, probably from when it's approved. You can work, these are all internal metrics. So for some people, it'll be from when the vacancy was approved. Other times it might be from when the vacancy happened, like when Tony resigned on the 1st of January, and it took us till the 4th of March to actually have someone in his seat doing his work. That's, you could call that a empty chair report as well in some organizations. And then you could also have the average time to being productive. Now, if you're like a call center or something where it's easy to measure to a degree, you say like, well, the number of calls that are handled by our support center, on average is like 50 in a shift or something. Then it was like, well, how long did it take this person to get to 50 and to be signed off and say, yeah, they're now productive? And you sort of work out then the sort of cost to the business by someone leaving, that sort of thing. It's like, well, it's going to take us 4 months to be back up to the strength that we were when they were here. Okay, so you know what I'm going to talk about next on this slide? I'm sure you can work it out. Yes, it's source, and that's a very bad joke. Apologies. Source of applicants, source of shortlisted applicants. So I'll talk about these two. And I'll tell you another little addition that we're going to be able to do for our customers using AI shortlisting, which is really interesting. So obviously, source of applicants, where all the applicants came from. I might actually be able to show you some data on that. I should be able to actually. Some global data. Let me just see all my things. Here we go. So let me just remove that. I can drag it into screen. So we've got about 300,000 applicants last 90 days, and we can see Indeed Easy Apply, which is the ability to the candidates get processed on the Indeed website. And then you've also got Indeed as well here. Like that's the ones where Indeed has redirected the applicant across, and they've completed the process on the application form. So most of our customers are choosing to use Indeed Easy Apply, but not all of them can. Some need the full application form completed. You sort of see. So Indeed is clearly driving most of the applications for our customers. Our customers in many cases don't have huge budgets, so maybe they don't get to advertise on other job boards and Total Jobs and Reed and other things like LinkedIn and other things like that. So yeah, this is not the most useful report, but gives you a bit of an idea. But this, you should see this for yourselves, hopefully, and you can break this down into individual job boards as well. We limit this by only showing a certain number, because otherwise the pie chart, the slivers can be too small. You can't appreciate it. But that's useful. Source of applicants, you should be thinking about that. Where do we get our applicants from? But really, the question you're asking is, where do we get the good applicants from? Now, if you get good applicants applying and your process or even your offering is not good enough to get them confirmed as a new starter, that's sort of different to the challenge of getting good applicants to apply. The two things are separate. The solution to those problems are separate as well. So when I look at source of applicants, really what I'll be focused on would be who's delivering me the good applicants. And one of the ways of achieving that is saying, well, once our recruiters look through the applicants, and then if you shortlist them for hiring managers or whatever that next step in the process is, it'd be understanding that. You want as big a number as possible. So as big a data set. So say you don't want to say like, oh, we've hired 4 applicants this year. Where did they come from? Because that could be just a bit of a one-off that you had a good applicant from some strange source. You don't want to start thinking, it's got to be about repeatability. So if you're getting dozens of good applicants for every job from this one source, then it's like, well, yeah, clearly that's repeatable. This is a good source that we should invest more time and money in, perhaps. But yeah, so that's what we're thinking about. Now, one of the things, as I mentioned with AI shortlisting, if the AI is coming in and the recruiter is setting the questions and the AI is rating the candidates, I'll just show you, I should better show my desktop. I've got some screenshots of this somewhere. If I can show AI shortlisting, what have I got here? I can't see these screenshots here so well, but okay. All right. So yeah, this will give you a bit of a screenshot to it. So the AI comes along and rates the applicant and lists them out, so you can sort of see who's the strongest. Then the people that are getting high scores, like the 86s or whatever, then you understand who they are. Then you can obviously say, right, who is delivering me applicants that are getting a score of at least 70 or at least 65, and then you can sort of use the AI to sort of give you that arbitrary score as to like who's delivering and where are we not getting good applicants from. So I think many of our customers that use the AI shortlisting, which is very new, will stop looking at the source of all their applicants. They'll ignore that and they'll focus on where are we getting the good applicants from. Source of interviews, source of offers, source of hires. And then source of good hires is interesting as well. So where do the good hires come from? As in, how do you measure that? You could measure it by, okay, well, firstly, most people don't measure good hires or higher quality at all. That's just, there's loads of studies done on it and there's very few organizations doing it. And the reason they don't is because they can't measure it perfectly. So they decide not to measure it at all, which is a bit of a shame, okay? And a bit of a waste, really, because you're there as a recruiter filling jobs, but are you actually getting the best people in? Is the process you've got working really well to confirm the very best, to find and confirm the very best applicants? Okay. Those who measure any aspect of the quality of hire will start to see this. Yeah. The two challenges here, obviously, one of the challenges is, it's quite difficult to measure, but the other challenge is it can take time as well. So one of the ways you could look at it is say, like, has the person stayed in the business for at least a year or at least 2 years? It depends on how quickly what your typical employee retention is. But maybe 2 years is a good benchmark, or a year is a good benchmark. Because some people, the bad fits, the people who don't fit whatever it is culturally, not particularly good at doing the role, or whatever it is, maybe they're leaving between a year. So you just measure, like I say, measuring it perfectly is not going to be possible, but measuring it on some sort of level is going to be better than nothing. Yeah. So I would try and measure it perhaps like that and go, right, who's still here after a year that we've hired them? The other way of doing it, you'll see later, I've got a survey that says, asking the hiring manager, would you rehire this person? Or how good a fit is this person from 1 to 10 for this job? And asking that 90 days after that person starts. So you get this sort of candidate fit score, because the hiring managers had them for 90 days now, should have a bit of a guide as to sort of be able to benchmark them as to how well they are. But I would encourage you to look at checking out some sort of process for managing good hires. Okay, and then cost. Cost is pretty straightforward. Cost per application by source, per interview by source, per hire. But don't forget, I would be looking at cost instead of per applicant by source. I would be looking at cost per relevant applicant, per high quality applicant. If I was finding who did we shortlist, or who did the AI tell us that was a good candidate, and you can look at that and go from there. That's going to be more interesting than who just threw us a load of applicants. I was using Indeed this week as a candidate. I'm not looking for a new job. You can actually still get up with me on these webinars, but for a friend. And I was amazed by how poor Indeed was to just even filter and search for jobs. It almost felt like Indeed wanted to keep sending you jobs. So for quickly read, I could set a salary. I could say, right, from 25 to 35K, knowing that anything over 35 is going to be irrelevant. For Indeed, I can't do that. I can just say, show me jobs that have at least 25K salary. And then I see everything. It almost felt like Indeed wanted to throw loads of jobs at me as a candidate. And therefore I'm thinking, why? Well, maybe it was trying to encourage me to apply to lots of jobs because that's what it wants me to do. But they're not a good fit. Doesn't work for the candidate, definitely doesn't work for the recruiter. So yeah, that is a concern. And then obviously diversity, equity, and inclusion is really key. So you want to be measuring, you no doubt already do this, measure diversity of applicants, diversity of the shortlisted applicants though, okay? Diversity of interviewed applicants, offered applicants, hired applicants. Yeah, this is really key. You can sort of appreciate all this. I keep talking about these AI shortlisted applicants, but I think it creates us a really useful filter on this area as well, because I can show you some, I don't know if I've got any data here. Yeah, but I could show you some ratios where we see things like perhaps within each department, you'd be able to show you like the average ratio of applicants to interview. Let's look at gender, okay? So maybe you're saying, to this manager in a certain department, okay, it takes 27 females to apply for a role for every interview that comes in, whereas for males, it's 12-to-1 ratio. You can go to that manager with that stat. You've got a good bit of data there. The manager, I'm pretty sure you guys would agree with me, would probably push back and say, I'm just selecting the best people for interview. So you can't really do much with it in some respects. Now, with AI shortlisting, looking against the 3 questions that you've set for that role, that you've maybe agreed with the manager, that's really key. Must have experience of this, must be skilled in that. Yeah, and then you can see you can filter that whole report to just say, now let's look at it as what's the ratio for getting an interview if you're a highly scored candidate by the AI. So you're now looking at just the relevant applicants, hopefully. So you're now going, is that gap still there? In which case you can go and have a much better conversation with that manager, and perhaps there's a training issue, perhaps it's something else, maybe it's just a mindset thing, they need to be more aware of these things, and you can make much more progress. So I do feel like some of this data is really useful, but sometimes if it's just pointing at something but not giving you enough information for you to go and make those changes, it sort of says you might have a problem here, but you don't really have enough information to move forward. Yeah. And one of the other challenges here, which is the next thing I'm going to talk about, is how many people actually answer this question. The typical diversity monitoring question. Are you happy for us to provide to collect this data? Yeah. Now I'm going to show you a couple of things on this. At the moment, it's a little bit of an old number, it's maybe a year or two old, but at the moment, only 17%, it's a bad stat for me to share with you about hireful ATS. I will explain it. Only 17% of applicants using hireful ATS answer this question yes. So I'm happy to show you that number. It's not a good number. You want to get a much higher number than that. But why is that? Well, if you go back to the screenshot I showed you a little while ago with 50% of the applicants coming via Indeed Easy Apply, they're not being asked diversity monitoring questions. Now, we've got a really good integration with Indeed. Most of the time you apply Indeed Easy Apply, you don't get diversity, you don't get asked for your diversity questions. We're now adding those in for most customers. If the customer's got the standard one, they'll be able to do it. So we will be able to fill that gap, okay? But a lot of the applicants who come via Read Easy Apply, Total Job Easy Apply, they're not completing your application form, so it's very easy to not have this question asked. Yeah, so you can end up missing or not asking these questions to these candidates. Okay. So then what we did, really simple, we built a second form, diversity data capture form, and we emailed out to candidates to say, hey, look, you've applied for this role with our customer. You know, our customer really values, diversity, equity, inclusion. I wanted to, we didn't capture your data. Now, it could be two things. It could be they didn't see it because of the process they went through, or when they applied, they were really busy and they said, I don't want to give you this data. And we're just asking one last time to say that this is important. You know, you don't have to provide it, but would really like to provide it. Just asking this one last time. 40% of people, this is amazing stuff. I was completely blown away by it. But 40% of people who get that email actually complete the form. Yeah, maybe they get that because it sits on their inbox. Maybe it's, oh, I can do that when I get a chance. Yeah, but when they're applying, they probably think, I'm under pressure, I'm busy, I just want to get through this and complete, I'm excited, I want to complete the application. So that was really surprising for us. I'm going to show you, I've got some stats to show you on that. I'm never quite good at explaining them, but I'll show you here. So not all of our customers have turned this on. So this is sort of, when we say global, that means all of our customers. Diversity data capture. So at the moment, overall, it's 22% essentially, we're capturing data. We still have that problem that a lot of our customers are coming in via routes whereby they're not being asked. So a lot of the applicants are coming in via routes where they're not being asked for their diversity data because they're coming in via Easy Apply. Yeah, and I'm pretty confident if you're using ATSs as well that have Easy Apply enabled, which is so important to gather good applicants these days. You see over half the applicants coming in are coming from Indeed Easy Apply alone. That doesn't include Read or Total Jobs or others like CV Library. You'll see like at the moment, 70% are coming from the application form, and then we're getting a further 30% of that number from the follow-up ones. And then for customers using diversity capture, then most when they've turned it on, they're getting 15% from the application form. Now, these are the people that are using Easy Apply. They'll want us to turn on diversity, this extra email, because they know they're not getting a good number. And then that number goes up because they get a huge capture rate from the email. Yeah. So they're up to 40% overall because most of that's driven by the email. Okay. To give you a bit of an idea. Okay. So let's think about where your data gaps are. So common data gaps are things like subjective data, where you need objective data. We talked about like the reason for an offer being declined, or asking applicants to answer a question you could automatically record. How did you hear about this vacancy? So if you can track that, you don't have a data gap. It's perfect. You've got a really solid process. Because I bet you, how did you hear about this vacancy? If it's a manual thing, a lot of people just choose the first option, like company website. And maybe you can't capture data if you don't have permission. If people don't accept your cookie policy, maybe you can't capture how they're using your website. Yeah, or maybe you're just not recording data. As I said, your ATS provider didn't take a sort of maximum data capture approach. So how do we go get this data? How do we record this? All of the time data that I spoke about, like time to hire, time to this, that's all recorded by people changing the status and us recording when that status was changed. They've now moved to interview. They've now moved to offer. So yeah, so this is what we call sort of project maximum data capture. Log everything in your ATS. So that's the first thing. If you say, oh, we don't put these jobs in our ATS, then I would say, well, don't worry too much about reporting, because every report's going to have a massive asterisk on it saying, oh, but this only includes these jobs, or only includes these applicants. If your agencies can't submit applicants via or your internal applicants go via a different route and they're not in the ATS, then you're going to only have half the picture. Okay, so you want everyone in there. Everything, even logging things like failed starters, that should be systematically logged as well. I think I've covered that twice now. I don't know why it's up there twice. Apologies. And then who mentioned about surveys? So someone earlier mentioned about, so Harriet mentioned about surveys. So these are the surveys that we typically do. So we've got surveys in the system for like post-interview. So once someone's done an interview, you can sort of send them out 5 questions. Post-vacancy, you can survey, well, we don't have that, but we've got a template, you can do it manually. You might want to survey hiring managers. What was the recruitment experience like? You can survey new hires, which I think is what Harry is talking about. And the new hires, I'd make that, the others I'd make anonymous to a degree, but these ones, some of them you want to be clear about who's come in and what they've said. So on new hires, I'll get them to put their name to it personally, so you can follow them and dig through and find good things. And then obviously post-induction, you can even survey post-induction. Now, you could argue, too many surveys here, Adrian, what's going on? Lots of, you're going to get lots of data. I don't have a problem with surveying, as long as at the end of that survey, you're geared up to sort of not just collect the data, but to sit down, analyze it, and take action from it, and feed back to the people, if possible, who gave you that information, those ideas, and let them know that you're taking these actions. Yeah. If you're doing that, and we do a lot of surveys as a business with our staff, then I think our staff feel and are shown, and we communicate it really well, that we're taking action. So once you're doing that, you can survey everything. I'm slightly running out of time. I'll show you here on our what we're able to show. I'll show this more next week. These are the questions we ask on our interview survey. Everyone gets, so you can sort of see what you get is you get your average score and you get the benchmark score for all of the other customers using the survey. So you can sort of see during the interview, I had the opportunity to my skills. I was treated with respect throughout the process. How would you recommend the interview process out of 10? And then the other ones are just, well, the last question is just about giving feedback, open-ended feedback. Okay. And then scorecards are really simple, but what they're trying to do is, I suppose, 2 things. Record data like a snapshot in time data, because some data, it's like, well, where are we? What is the number for this data at the end of the month? How many applicants are currently outstanding? How many jobs have we got live at the moment, at the end of the month? How many, to get a picture of that. So sometimes the data itself is a moment in time data that allows you to sort of compare it to last month, the previous month, and all those other things. The other thing as well is a scorecard. I'll give you an example here. This is a business tool that we use called 90, but I've just created a quick little dummy example here just to show you when it loads. It's going to load for me. Let me zoom out a little bit. Here we go. So it's just got a little dummy example here whereby we can see the number of, well, I've got the dates quite far back, but you've got number of jobs, number of applicants, and then the average number of applicants per jobs, those sorts of things, and it colors it and everything else. So you can sort of see, if you can use your imagination a bit, I appreciate it's a little bit hard to see this, means out a bit. You can sort of see how it sort of calculates out. You can have a goal, you can have an average, and all these. So this is a scorecard, and the idea being, I can bring it into view now properly. There it is. The idea being, it gives you that moment in time reflection, and it tells you what's going on, and you can set goals to it, and you can talk it through. And in a monthly meeting, you could go, right, these are the numbers we're tracking. Even if they're in the ATS, it's great to pull them out of the ATS, put them next to each other, and use it as part of a monthly session. So I would massively encourage looking at scorecards. Okay. Done a scorecard example. Right, I was worried about time a second ago, but I think I'm back on time again now, so apologies I've gone a little bit fast. We're finishing up with the last section, the future of recruitment analytics and AI, because clearly AI is a huge passion of mine. All of my webinars have an element of AI focus on them, but when we think about AI, we know one of the big areas it's going to help with is analysis. It helps with structured data. So when we think about the moment, the way most software works, not just picking on ATS, this includes our software, you're selecting filter options, you're choosing drop downs. You have to remember to check reports. So if you want data, and that includes our ATS, there's reports in there. You have to click, go into it, find the report, maybe add an extra filter, have a look at it and go, how does that look for last month? And go back and change it to dates to last month. And you maybe have to do that on a regular basis. Yeah. That's not the future. That clearly is not how we're going to work in the future. How we're going to work in the future, it might be as simple as you asking the AI, how are we doing? How is it looking? How does it compare? Yeah. How can we improve? Yeah. And the AI will say, look, you're doing really well, but I think you've taken your eye off this number here because it's now. And what the AI does at the moment is it can highlight things to you. So when you talk about, is AI going to take my job? Well, the key thing that we see at the moment, I have to stress that for the coming few years, is that AI will provide the data, not necessarily the insight. It might provide a few ideas, suggestions. It could be A, B, or C, but it won't know what to do with the data. How do we solve this? How do we take action? What specifically is going on? You've got your experience. I've seen this before. Last time it happened, we had to do this. We need a training workshop for managers to make sure they understand how to do it. You'll know those things, but the AI will be very good at showing you the data you want, how you want it, when you want it, how does this compare, how does this benchmark, and your experience will be a bit more chat-based rather than drop-downs and filters. You will say, well, just show me that in a graph, but show me this, and then also show me a second graph with last month's data, and it will just show you that. Yeah, we're not at that level yet with hireful, but that's where we're starting to think and starting to talk about probably 2026, moving towards that sort of process whereby, there's reports, you can still go look at them, but you can just talk to a chatbot about your data and it will understand and come back to you and give you the data you need. Which sort of touches on to next week's webinar. We're going to be covering comparing past performance, benchmarking against similar organizations, using data to take the right strategic decisions, and sort of setting goals, hopefully to inspire your team. So that's next week's session. I've got another little thing I can show if anyone's interested around benchmarking. Well, it's sort of really for next week, but I can give you a bit of a heads up. Let me just, before we get to the takeaways, because I thought I was running out of time, but I'm not quite. I like to go right up to the hour, get the full hour from you guys if possible. This is Claude. If you're not aware of Claude, it's similar to ChatGPT. It's not very expensive to use. I built a Claude project. And one of the Claude projects I put in there, I want to just show you some of the other areas of analysis you can get. So I built a Claude project. A Claude project is similar to a custom GPT. So I've got one here, job advert analysis report, where I've got this here now, and I can come along here. I'll just show you this one here. So I've built a set of instructions for it to go in and look at a job advert, and then to produce me a report. So it's come along and it produces me this lovely report. It looks at the advert, which is the advert is here, and it says, have they done this? Have they done that? Have they explained the essential requirements of the role? What's the number of essential requirements they listed? It's 5. Okay, that's good. It's not too many. They didn't list salary. They didn't list benefits. They talked about diversity, but they didn't really talk about the culture. So this is just a tool to analyze advert copy. We're going to be building this into the ATS in the coming months, by the way. And so when people put a new advert on, it looks at some of the DEI stuff. Let me just show you here as well. Gender bias, masculine coded words, feminine coded words. It pulls out the feminine coded words that we used, and talks about that. So it does all this. It does a full report for you, which is great. So I see your ATS being able to analyze and audit your work, advert copy, like looking through your interview transcripts and things like this as well to say like how you did and how you could do better. But it can also be used to benchmark, because you can go and get like, okay, well, this is Fulham Football Club, who's one of our customers. You could benchmark that against the other football clubs in the London area to see how well, they compare against them, from a inclusion, from the way they present themselves, where they talk about their organization, everything else. So AI is here. This is a good example to take unstructured data like a job advert, give it a good set of instructions, which I did. I spent about 5 hours working on the instructions of how to do this, because it's got like little examples here talking about, it doesn't just say like why culture is important, it gives information back to the user to explain why. So yeah, so it can do all this analysis for you and provide it back to you. So it's quite nice. And then the other one I'll show you is, I'll just show you really quickly what we did earlier. What we did on Tuesday, we looked at doing deep research with ChatGPT, where I gave it an accountancy firm and I gave it 4 other accountancy firms' career sites to go look at to compare. So I've got the Word document here. So and it went through and it looked at and compared like the strengths of the company I gave and compared it to the other 4 competitors for like how it talked about, employee well-being focus. It says, well, currently the company I told it I was from, highlights this. Okay, this is good, but other people do this. Looking directly at these 4 competitors. So it's really, really, and it's a 4,000 word report or something. It's like impressive. So AI can definitely get involved in helping us to, produce analysis and benchmarking, and I'll be doing a bit more of that next week. There's lots of little tools out there that I'm building and I've built, so hopefully that might be useful. I can see some questions coming through, so I'm going to get to those questions. I'm going to finish off with the takeaways first. So firstly, choose your key metrics. If everything's a key metric, a KPI, nothing's a KPI. So work out which ones are the really important ones for you. Get a schedule in. Is it quarterly? Is it monthly? Could be you're looking at the key ones every month, and then you have a slightly longer list you're going to look at every quarter. And then understand your data gaps. So what is the data you want to be able to report on, you can't, and how do you plan to go forward to resolve that information? And it could be, some of those data gaps could be, we want to benchmark. We've got a number here, we can see it's trending slightly up, that's okay, but we don't know whether it's actually a high performing number, so we need to benchmark. Okay, if you're leaving the session now, guys, I'm going to answer these last few questions. Please post any questions you've got. We have a wall of love, so you get to survey the webinar, tell us how well we've done. I really appreciate that. Rate the webinar out of 10. If when you add a comment, you add your name next to it, then we can put you on our little wall of love on our webinar page. We'd love that. We're trying to build out our testimonials. That'd be fantastic. And yeah, that's that. So let's see about these questions. So we've just got the one from Serena. Hopefully, Harriet, I answered your question about the feedback form. If you're interested, Harriet, if anyone's interested, you're welcome to. I've got a survey with all the questions on. I can share with you. However, I would say it's just so easy to go to ChatGPT or even a Google search and say, I'm looking to survey this. Give me an example template. There'll be, you'll get, and particularly ChatGPT, give me more questions, give me more questions. You'll be able to get like a long list of 100 questions you might want to ask, and then drill that down into maybe 10 or 12. Okay, Serena's asked, are you aware of any free tools that would be useful to recruiters, particularly if you work for a business without an ATS? So, I mean, what some people use is they will use form builders, like job form and things like this to get an application form. So people can go off there to apply. Instead of it applying via email, then you go and you fill out a form to apply. And that means you're just capturing some data, possibly diversity data, for example. You've got to make sure that that form provider is based in the EU. There's, you don't want to be having people submit data onto US servers. That could create some GDPR concerns. So, and I'm not saying that would be free, Serena, but that would be something. But yeah, there isn't too many free tools out there. I'm building a lot of free tools. I'm going to be launching them shortly. So that advert analysis tool, I'm going to be producing that as a free tool where you can go in and put your advert in and it will analyze it for you and you can compare it to maybe competitors. So I've got a few things, but they're just little quirky little tools, not anything that's going to solve the issues we're talking about today. Essentially today, to achieve, good knowledge of your recruitment analytics, you need an ATS because all the activity happens on the ATS and then you can report against that activity. You know how long it's taking you to do things, where all the applicants have come from and who the people you offered are and everything else. So all the activity happens on the ATS. So you don't really have much chance of having good data insights without an ATS, unfortunately. I know I'm biased because we sell ATSs, but we're not that expensive. Judith has asked, it'd be great to see a real example of how analytics identified a problem and led to process improvements. Yeah, no, that might be more of a sort of possibly something that would happen on the recruiter roundtables, Judith, that we do, where we talk about analytics. That would be a great question. You know, if you was on that in that group, to throw in that question to say, has anyone got examples where they've used this to take real action? Because I'll talk about our recruitment, but we're not really recruiting that much at the moment, and we're a 50 staff company. So yes, we have an ATS, it's our own ATS, but we don't have loads of data flowing through it that allows us to make really good actions. If we were like 500 staff company hiring 100 people a year or something, then we'd have a lot more data, a lot more need to reflect upon it, and we'd be able to make some better decisions. Okay, I don't see anything else coming through, so hopefully that's useful. Hopefully I'll see you next week. I will share the webinar link. Now I'll put it on the chat. So if anyone wants to book on for next week, it's on the website. There you go. Yeah, so next week's webinar, we've got some other webinars coming through as well around social recruiting. I've got a webinar specifically around AI shortlisting coming up next week, I think, as well. So yeah, lots happening, and I'll keep you updated on those free tools we're doing, and we'll send you out the slides and the recording and everything else, guys. And then my contact details are here. So any other questions, just drop me an email or reach out. You know, my job title is Chief Helper. So that's what I'm meant to do. I'm meant to be here to help you guys. If everyone reached out to me, that would be a problem. I'd struggle. But that doesn't happen. So be that person. If you've got a challenge, a problem, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to help. And good luck with your analytics. All right. Thanks, guys. Bye.